In this video, we are going to talk about inguinal canal, the classification of inguinal hernias, and contents of the spermatic cord. Right, so to understand, we'll start with the inguinal ligament. Inguinal ligament, also known as the Poppert's ligament, is formed by the lower border of external oblique aponeurosis, which is thickened and folded backwards on itself, extending from the anterior superior iliac spine here to the pubic tubercle here. Surgical anatomy of the inguinal canal. The inguinal canal is an oblique passage in the lower part of the abdomen. It's 3.5 to 4 centimeters long and situated above the medial half of the inguinal ligament, extending from the deep inguinal ring to the superficial inguinal ring. Right, so here is the superficial inguinal ring and deep inguinal ring. So let's look at the superficial inguinal ring and deep inguinal ring individually. Superficial inguinal ring is a triangular opening in the external oblique aponeurosis and is 1.25 centimeters above the pubic tubercle. Right, so you can see it here. Right, so what are the borders? The ring is bounded by a superomedial and inferolateral crus. Right, so you can see lateral and medial crus. Right, you can see that back there in yellow and here in pink. Normally, the superficial inguinal ring does not admit even the tip of the little finger. And it corresponds to the midpoint of the inguinal ligament, that's halfway point between the anterior superior iliac spine and the pubic tubercle. Deep inguinal ring. So this is a U-shaped decondensation of the fascia transversalis that lies 1.25 centimeters above the inguinal ligament, midway between the pubic symphysis and the anterior superior iliac spine, right? So if you look at this view, this is very important. If you look, you see the vessels, right? The inferior epigastric vessels. The deep inguinal ring is found like lateral here. It's lateral, right? That is very important. It's palpable as a soft spot and it conducts the extraperitoneal structures, thus external to the parietal peritoneum. Right, okay. Boundaries of the inguinal canal, not inguinal ligament. Boundaries of the inguinal canal. Right, anteriorly, there is external oblique aponeurosis, which is medial and conjoined muscle. That's the internal oblique and transversus abdominis laterally. Posteriorly, there is inferior epigastric artery, fascia transversalis, and the insertion of the conjoined tendon medially. Superiorly, or the roof, the conjoined tendon, the fibers of the internal oblique and transversalis abdominis. Inferiorly, that's the floor, there is inguinal ligament. Right, what does the inguinal canal transmit normally? Right, so in males, it transmits the spermatic cord, and in females, it transmits mainly the round ligament. Right, so let's look at the contents of the spermatic cord. Right, so firstly, you have the vas deferens, and you have the artery to the vas deferens. You have the testicular and cremasteric artery, right? So this is the cremasteric artery and this is the testicular artery. You have the genital branch of the genitofemoral nerve here. The pampiniform plexus of veins here, what you're seeing in blue, that's the pampiniform plexus. The remains of the processus vaginalis, sympathetic plexus around the artery to the vas deferens. All right, so those are the contents, right, listed here. These are the main contents. About the coverings, right, so from inside there is internal spermatic fascia from the fascia transversalis here, cremasteric fascia here, and the external spermatic fascia here outside, from the external oblique aponeurosis, and is seen below the external ring in the scrotum. This is the normal anatomy, right, of the inguinal canal, right? So it's maintained by the obliquity of the inguinal canal, the arching of the conjoint tendon, the shutter mechanism of the internal oblique, the bow value mechanism due to contraction of the cremaster muscle, and this contraction will plug to the superficial inguinal ring. And when external oblique muscle contracts, the intercrural fibers of the superficial inguinal ring will oppose, causing the slit valve mechanism, right? So this is what normally prevents the herniation. But if there are any causes which I just mentioned which predispose to hernia, this is what will happen, right? So you can see the intestinal loop inside the inguinal canal, right? So that's the inguinal hernia. Let's look at the classification of inguinal hernias, right? So there is anatomical classification and classification according to the extent, right? Starting with the anatomical classification, there is a direct inguinal hernia, right? This one comes through the internal or deep inguinal ring along with the spermatic cord, and it is lateral to the inferior epigastric artery, right? So this is the inferior epigastric artery. So the direct inguinal hernia will be lateral here, and the inguinal ligament is inferior to the hernia, right? The deep inguinal hernia. The deep inguinal hernia occurs through the posterior walls of the inguinal canal through the Hasselbalch's triangle, right? So this is the Hasselbalch's triangle, which is bounded medially by the lateral border of rectus abdominis muscle, laterally by the inferior epigastric artery, and below there is inguinal ligament. So if you look here, you see, right, so this on the right is a femoral hernia, right? So forget about that one. Look on the left here. Here in red, that's the direct inguinal hernia, and laterally there is indirect inguinal hernia. All right, okay. So the inguinal hernia is above and medial to the pubic tubercle. The femoral hernia is below and lateral to the pubic tubercle, right? So this is important so that you won't confuse the location. All right. Classification according to extent. There is incomplete, complete, and saddlebag or pantaloons, right? Incomplete hernia. So if you look here, this is incomplete hernia, right? So there are two kinds, bulbonoceal and funicular, right? In bulbonoceal, the sac is confined to the inguinal canal, right? So this is bulbonoceal. The hernial sac is confined to the inguinal canal. In funicular, the sac crosses the superficial inguinal ring but does not reach the bottom of the scrotum. This one. And incomplete hernia, the sac descends to the bottom of the scrotum here, right? So I have these images. So this is bulbonoceal hernia, this is funicular, and this is a complete or scrotal hernia. Thank you so much. If you like this video, please make sure you subscribe, you like it, and share with your friends. Until next time.